Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that a lot. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a question about the video, a suggestion for one, you want to tell me how you do things, or you just want to say hi, those are all great. So feel free to leave a comment if you want to. So I've had this star sapphire for a while, and it's about a 10 by 12 millimeter, so it's a pretty good sized one. I've gone back and forth over time about what kind of a ring I should make out of it, and I never could quite decide, so I decided to make a pendant instead. I don't recall seeing too many star sapphire pendants, so I think maybe it'll be a fun one to try. I drew up a little design that's kind of like a pendulum with a little kind of hingy bail on it. I've not made one just like this, so it should be a good experiment. I'm going to maybe put a texture on part of it at the end, so we'll see. But let's give it a try and find out how it turns out. Before we do, though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. First, my patrons, who are my core group of supporters over on Patreon. They're a fantastic group of people with a whole lot of talent and are super nice to be supporting me, so thank you for your support. I do really appreciate that. The next group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 21,200, which is amazing to me. Thank you for that. I do really appreciate your support as well. And I love the comments I get on YouTube. So many people tell me the nicest things, and I love it when people tell me that they're getting something out of the videos. So thanks for telling me those things. Thanks also for the super thanks and the buy me a coffees, as well as people who buy stuff from me, my ebooks, the merch store, that kind of stuff. That helps to keep me afloat, and so I can continue doing these videos. So thanks for that support as well. All right, well, let's get started on this pendant. I apologize if I'm a little stuffy tonight. My allergies have been kind of bad today. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks. Lately, on the different versions we have on the merch store, I've put some useful charts on the back. This one has wire gauge to inches to millimeters, which I find pretty useful sometimes. I like them because they have this grid pattern in the background. It helps me to sketch up my designs a little nicer. So, if you're interested, they're available on my merch store. Okay. Here's what I drew up for this. It kind of looks a little mid-century modern to me, maybe, which would be suitable for this kind of a style with a blue sapphire, star sapphire like this. You saw a lot of that from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That was pretty popular. I don't know if this is a Lindy star or if this is a natural star. Usually Lindy stars, the star is perfect, and this one is not perfect. So this may be a natural one. A lot of times natural ones have rough backs, though, so I don't know. If anybody knows, tell me what they think, because I'm curious about that. I've never really had the skill to tell the difference between these things. So all right, so let's talk about the pendant here. This is a 10 by 12 star sapphire. I'm going to use 26 gauge fine silver bezel strip at 3/16 inch tall, which is 4.76 millimeters, if I recall correctly, and 26 gauge is 0.41 millimeters thick. I think I will go ahead and put a bottom on this because it's not translucent enough to really transmit any light from the back anyway, so there seems no reason to have an open back, and the back is not polished terribly well. So we'll make a bezel for that. For this little border piece here that goes around it, I'm going to take some 10 gauge square that I've flattened. I did it, and I flattened it to about 1.9 or 1.8, somewhere in there, millimeters thick. So I'm going to use it this way. I want it to be relatively thick, and I want it to stick up from the sheet that we're going to make this part out of, so that it's distinct from that. And this is going to have a high polish, and I think I'm going to try and texture this with some sandpaper, or actually just lay some sandpaper on top of this portion and lightly tap it with my chasing hammer. And that'll oftentimes give kind of almost a sandblasted look if you do it for a while. That's my thought, and we'll see how that looks. If not, I can always polish it back to a high polish again. But so this is going to be 18 gauge sheet down here we'll use for that. Like I said, this is 10 gauge. No, 18 gauge sheet is about 1 millimeter thick. 10 gauge square, if I remember right, starts out at 2.6 millimeters about. And like I said, I flattened this down to about 1.8 or something like that. This is going to be a piece of 14 gauge round, which is 1.6 millimeters. I probably, for this part, I'll use a piece of 18 for the bail. And I'm just going to make it long and skinny down here, and then we'll roll it into a little kind of loop around there, and we'll put that over that 14 gauge wire and solder it closed. And I think I'm going to solder a little bit of 22 gauge on top of this in that kind of a configuration, and do the same thing I did with this down here. So at least that's the plan for now. We'll see how that goes. Sometimes it's fun to change your plans midway, but I kind of like this design, so we'll see. Let's make a bezel for this stone first. This is relatively tall bezel, and this is what I keep around mostly. It's just easier to keep one big tall bezel. That way you can just file it down to whatever height you want. Still tired from the last video I did. That one kept me up till after midnight filming it. That was the one with the 3 flowers. 3 flower pendants. If you're new to my channel, I use almost always hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux that I dribble onto the dropper bottle. My torch that I use primarily is a Silversmith model. It's an air acetylene torch, so it draws in atmospheric air and mixes it with the gas in the chamber there. And it produces a flame that's hotter than propane, but not near as hot as oxyacetylene. So it's a great torch. I really like it. I would totally take a sponsorship from Smith over that. Smith, did you hear me? If you're kind of new to this and you haven't tried doing a hingey sort of thing, this kind of a simple hinge might be a good way to start. I think it'll make kind of a fun bail. We'll see. I've never done one quite like this. One of the things I forget to do sometimes when I'm coming up with ideas is I forget to figure in texture to create some contrast. I'm not sure why I always forget to do that, because it really oftentimes will produce a really pretty piece. So I said one of the things I struggle with a lot is getting oxidizers to oxidize things evenly, and so I rarely use them. So I have like liver of sulfur gel, and I still have some it's either black max or silver black that I got a long time ago. And I can use those, but I just don't ever get very consistent darkening. There are times, though, where it comes in handy. My stomach just growled. I wonder if the microphone is sensitive enough to pick that up. I also wonder whether or not Chad will be awake enough in the morning when he's editing this video to remember to take out his stomach growling from the audio. Seems like when I'm filing and when I'm shaping stuff, I kind of get lost in my thoughts. Which is nice sometimes, because it's just nice to be able to fall into doing something like this once in a while. Kind of forget what you're doing and just kind of go. I find that kind of nice. It's one of the reasons I think I started doing this, was because you can kind of just lose yourself in it sometimes. I think we're pretty good on size there, as long as I can get the shape to stay the way I want it. Yeah, I don't know, for the first 15 years I did this, maybe, I never even really experimented any with textures. I just made everything a high polish, and I have no idea why. I just never really thought to do that kind of stuff. I learned the basics by taking a couple of classes from a local guy, and then I just kind of started going off and exploring on my own some of the different aspects of this. But I didn't stray very far from what I learned at the beginning for quite a while. So it's hard to break out of patterns sometimes, I think. So doing the YouTube channel has been probably the best thing for having me grow as a metalsmith, because this forces me to try new things and stuff that I've not been that I've always been afraid to try before, because I lacked the confidence to try, you know. So okay, let's put a bottom on this. I think I'm going to put I don't particularly need a thick bottom on this one, so I'm just going to use some 26 gauge. The rest of this is going to be pretty solid, so that'll be fine. It'll save a little weight on the final piece too. I am a little horsey tonight. I tell you, my allergies have been terrible this year for some reason. I'm going to cut myself a few more pieces of solder. If you're new to this, hard solder melts at about 1450 degrees Fahrenheit. I do not remember off the top of my head what the Celsius or centigrade is. I feel like 731 maybe, if I remember. I'll put it in the video when I remember. Okay. Let's throw a few of these in here. I need to clean off the tips from my tweezers. Periodically you get gummed up with flux and stuff, so you gotta clean them off once in a while. A lot of times the flux is sort of in that plasticky stage when it's coated on those things. And you can just squeeze them with a pair of pliers and it'll kind of break off. Or you could sand it off, I suppose, or file it off. this one, I'm just going to trim off the excess sheet. Alright, so I'm going to do that. I probably should anneal this because I ran it through the rolling mill a few times to get it flattened out. So let's do that. If you're new to this, annealing is to get the metal back to a softer state. When you work it, whether you're pounding on it or stretching it or twisting it or even bending it back and forth, it starts to make the metal harder. And so if you need to soften it back up again and make it more easy to work with, just heat it up to kind of a dull red color. And let it cool for a while and then quench it when it's cooled off a little bit. Let's just use nail making pliers. I think might be a good bet to go with. As far as length, I got plenty to work with here, so I'm figuring if I line this up like this, then I come to here, and then it's going to take a little bit of length to get to the center point, so about to right there. So if I double that, that should be a big enough piece, right? Science. Here. That's actually pretty good as far as the curve on the bottom. I think I need to extend it back outwards just a little bit. Right there. Right there. So I think probably in order to get it perfect, it might be beneficial to get this all ready to be soldered together, solder this bottom part so it's like that, and then I'll be able to shape these nicely after they're attached. And then I think we'll probably cut out that piece of sheet and get it shaped like that. And we'll use this then as a guide to what to cut out of that sheet. I want the top of this here to be kind of rounded, so I'm going to spend some time filing this, and I may use the rotary tool part of the time, but okay, so I've kind of rounded the top a little bit all the way around. I wanted it to kind of look like it wasn't just, you know, attached right to the bezel straight on, so I think that'll look kind of nice. And I've placed a few pieces of solder red under the bottom here, so it's touching the back of the bezel as well as the bottom of this piece of flattened square wire. So I normally put the flux on first and then the solder, but it just seemed a little bit easier this time to do it this way. I get asked a lot why I do it in the order I do it, where I put the flux on, dry the flux, and then add the solder. And it's because if you put the solder in there and then flux it, when you go to dry the flux, it boils and it moves the solder pieces around. So I find it to be better if you get the flux to be dry before you put the solder in there. That makes sense? There we go. Okay. I think that's pretty good, actually. So let's see how long we want this to be. So I think I'm going to cut it off there, and then we'll just kind of round the ends. For the sake of time, on this little chunk of 18 I have here, I went ahead and I scribed this out. Mostly I used this piece for the bottom there, and then I used part of this in order to go the distance from there up to there. So I just had to do a little measuring to do that, and so I scribed it out on there. And so first off, I think we need to cut this out. So let's get this cut out, and then I'll trace out where I want this to be on the inside, and we'll use the solder to get the inside curve. I could probably cut these most of the way. Okay, so sometimes I'll put a little bit of Sharpie on top of a surface if I want to scratch a line where things are going to come together. And I thought it would be nice if this wasn't moving around too much when I was trying to do this. And maybe I can even get these to stick down. But I have to figure out how far up I want this to be. I just stabbed myself. I should have taken that black down a little bit further, but that gives me a pretty good idea of where to saw that out. So let's go do that. I want to kind of stay on the inside of this line, so I'm going to try and get those started on either side. I was not a fan of sawing for many years. It helped when I got a better saw. I will say that. This is a 00. Hey, perfect time to break the blade. Okay, I'm going to use the Dremel with an abrasive white wheel to just kind of clean this up a little bit. So I got this lined up and pushed down into the pad to my liking, and it's pretty close to staying exactly where I want it to be. Oops. I think I better go have some dinner after I get these pickling. Getting a little shaky. Most of the mass in this one is in this piece of sheet, so a lot of the heat needs to be focused there in order for the entire piece to get up to temperature at about the same time. If you're interested, I know pick soldering is a useful skill that a lot of people haven't learned at the beginning. Where you pick up a little bit of solder on one of the soldering picks like this. I just wanted to add a little bit more here, so once you get it up to the soldering temperature, I can watch the other solder joints until they reflow. See, just touch it on there and jump on there. So if you're interested, there's a video right there. I'll put a link to. Okay. Looks like we got a decent seam all the way around pretty much, which is good. That'll look nice. So I think our next step here needs to be to put our little pin in here. Let me find a piece of 14 gauge if I can. Kind of positioned it towards the front. That way, because we're going to wrap this 18 gauge around it, it'll give it just a little bit more space to move between the chest of the person wearing it and this thing. So let's solder it in there. I think just use that soft surface again. That was kind of handy sometimes. So again, this is one of those mass disparity situations where you have a lot of mass in this big part of the pendant down here, not much up at the top. So that little wire takes very little time to reach 1450 degrees. The rest of the piece takes a much longer time period to do that. So that's why we put most of the heat on that side first. If you have any excess solder there on this piece, you might want to remove before we put the little bail part on here. Less chance of any unexpected accidents happening. Alright, so I did a little, last time I took a camera break, I did a little of this. Because on the, if you remember, on the bail, I was going to put a little something as a decoration that should match the texture down here. So I did some texturing of a little piece I was going to lay over the top of this, so we can solder that down. Then we should be able to wrap that around. Now this texture we'll do after we polish the whole thing. And if when I polish this, if it takes a lot of this off, I'll redo this part of it. But the way I did it was very simple. And we'll do this after I polish, but I just put it on some sandpaper. I think this is actually 80 grit. And I just took my chasing hammer longer you do it, the more frosty it'll look. So our next step, let's solder this onto here. And the easiest way to do that would be to sweat a little bit of solder on the back of this and just lay it on top and heat them both until they flow. Sometimes these things will kind of skate once they flow. That's why I have my pick ready to move it back where I want it once it does. And this bottom part, I'm going to flatten it out just a skosh. And I'm going to take a piece of 22, I think, and make a little kind of tube on the back out of it. I just kind of, I'm going to cut a strip, put a little whoop-de-doo in the middle, for lack of a better term, and we'll solder it to the back of this. There's a zillion different ways to make bales. I have quite a few bale videos if you're interested. I have a findings playlist. I'll put a link up there for you if you're interested. I think that's a kind of a useful place to find some different bales and things, because it's always nice to change things up once in a while. I was thinking we could just solder this on there like that, and then trim off the excess. So I think I'm going to use a little bit of medium solder here. I just don't want anything running around on me on the other side once I have it where I want it. That's what it's going to be like. So let's use a little bit of easy there so we don't mess anything up. Okay, once this is pickled and polished, I'll come back and we'll texture this part here with some sandpaper again, and then we'll set the stone. So I have my piece done. I did retexture this a little bit. I may do a little bit more on the top, but now I need to do this area. So what I did was I kind of crudely cut this out here, and I put a piece of silver on top here because it's smoother than my bench block, and then Let's start doing what we did before. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set the stone, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to smooth out the top of this part that's supposed to be shiny with a rotary tool bit, probably a blue fine silicone polishing bit, because I wanted that to contrast with the kind of texture that we created. So let's get this stone set, and then we'll be done. Okay, I got a little bit of uncorrugated cardboard underneath there as a backing. And I do this a little differently than some do. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. So we'll start by doing that. Alright, last step is the burnishing, and I'm going to use that rounded outer part there. That is kind of what I was shooting for. So I'll get that, the little spots that need extra shining up, shined up, and then we'll get some pictures on the chain. Okay, well that was the open pendulum pendant with the star sapphire. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and look at my main channel page. I have 480 some videos last I checked, and so there's a ton of content over there, and I'm sure that you'll be able to find something else that is useful or interesting over there. So do that, subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. If you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I talked about at the beginning, those can be gotten through that link. There's a link to my newest ebook, which is a tutorial guide to 2024's tutorials on YouTube here. It has 170 plus video links, including extra information and pictures and materials lists, difficulty ratings, all that kind of stuff for each of the videos. It's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel. Thanks for that if you choose to do that. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that nice community over there. There's multiple tiers in Patreon. You can get, for $5 a month, you can get all of my YouTube videos as I release them with no commercials, so you can get rid of the irritating advertising. The tiers going up from there include extra tutorials, live streams sometimes, things like that. So check it out. It's a nice place over there. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.